Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online special request character build with me, Sherman. Today guys, I bring you the Dragons Rage Barbarian. Now this is going to replace the Dragons Rage character release I did here recently, and that's fine, but it's going to replace that. This is the new version. And as for always, a disclaimer, this is a roleplay casual play build. This is not meant for meta play. But let's go ahead and get started. The idea behind the Dragons Rage Barbarian follows similar to that of the Dragons Rage. They call upon the ancient ancestral spirits of the dragons to imbue themselves with strength, ferocity, and everything that a dragon has to bring that to combat. Now, their primary role of the Dragons Rage Barbarian is damage dealers. They can also be tanks and healers if necessary. So, let's go ahead and take a look at this. This is an Argonian, or the Dragons Rage Barbarian is a Dragonknight. They use the power of the dragons, like I said, to imbue themselves with great rage and anger and hatred. That they go into a dragon frenzy, basically, when they go into combat. And as you can see, this one is an Argonian. It can be any race. There are going to be better options for this. If you're wanting it to be kind of a mix, it's better to go with something that's more Magicka focused, maybe a mix of stamina and Magicka, like a Khajiit or a Dark Elf. But Argonians work really good because they can play really good more of the support side of it, or the healer side if you want. And then if you're a more of a damage-based person, really like high damage output, Red Guards, Wood Elves, Orcs, and Nords make great Dragons Rage Barbarians. So, with this, being a damage dealer, we're going to put 64 points into stamina. That's going to give us a 19k Magicka, 22k health, 31k max stamina with the Argonian. Now, if you want to play this as a tank, you would take your attribute points out of stamina, put enough into health to get you to 30k, the rest into stamina. This way you can focus on being a tank and a damage dealer, kind of more or less. Now, if you want to play this character as a support healer character, you would take everything out of health and stamina and put it all into Magicka. They become more shamanic then, like a shaman, than they do a barbarian, but you can still play them that way. As you can see, we do have 557 mag recovery, 344 health recovery with a 944 stamina recovery. We have a 2517 weapon damage with a 43% weapon critical. We do have a 1607 spell damage with a 28% spell critical. We mainly have these higher numbers in the spell for when we play a healer type, but we're primarily a damage type. So we also take advantage of some magic damage. Now for spell resist, we have 18,000 spell resist with an 18,000 physical resist. The reason we have such high resistances is barbarians are very rugged and tough. They can withstand immense stress and strain on their bodies, and they use that to their advantage to give them greater oomph in fighting. We are using the Thief Mundustone for the damage dealer role. Now, if you're going to play this as a tank, it's better to go with the Lady Mundustone to boost your resistances, and then if you're playing this as a more of a support character, to use the Atronach Mundustone, so boost your magic recovery. And then when you are playing this as support, I'm going to tell you now, do not change the food. Just use the tripods with the Atronach Mundustone. You can use other sources of things to give you Magicka if you're suffering. Now, we do have Hatchling Shell. It's one of the sets we run, which gives us a damage shield for 15 seconds that absorbs X amount of damage all the time. So every 15 seconds, this shield is being reapplied to us. The next thing is we do use Tri-Stat Food to increase our max health, our max magic, and max stamina for 2 hours. Moving on to the potions. For tanking, we use tripods. This gives us health, magic, and stamina back, and it also gives us major fortitude, major intellect, and major endurance, increasing health, stamina, and magic recovery by 20% for 47 seconds. Now, If you want to go full-on stamina damage dealer, you can use Dubious Cameron Throne to maximize your max health and stamina, but it'll also give you really good stam recovery. And then when you move on down here to the different potions, we do use spell power pots and stamina power pots for different roles. So spell power pots for when we're playing healer, weapon power or warrior power pots or stamina power pots, whatever you want to call them, for when you're playing damage dealer. Alright, now let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the set, starting with our main set. Because of our Rage of Dragons, of being a Dragons Rager, we actually call upon the thunderous power of the dragon. And we use a set called Silitrix to do this. Now, this adds max stamina, the 2-piece. When you deal damage, you have a 10% chance to create an earthquake under the enemy that erupts after 1.5 seconds, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 4 meters and stunning them for 3 seconds. This effect can occur once every 5.5 seconds. This is the first one. The next set we have is called Jack of the Viper. Now this is the Viper Sting set. This drops in the Fungal Grotto 1. And this gives you weapon critical on the 2-piece, the 3-piece max stam, 4-piece weapon critical, and then the 5-piece. When you deal damage with a melee attack, you deal an additional 8,380 poison damage over 4 seconds. This effect can occur once every 4 seconds. Now the reason we use Viper's Sting is because we call upon the power of the poison dragons and stuff. So we use the Viper Sting set to give us that bite to our character, that we can bring that poison damage to us, to aid our allies in doing more damage. The next set we use is called Hatchling Shell. Now, as you can see, this gives you physical and spell resistance on the 2 and 3-piece. The 4-piece adds max health, and then the 5-piece. Gain a damage shield equal to 23% of your max health for 15 seconds every 15 seconds. This has no cast time or anything. You constantly have this shield on you. Now, moving on to the weapons. And this set here, the Hatchling Shell, or before we move on to the traits and enchants and armor types, this set is basically there because you call upon the resilience of the dragon's scales to apply resistance and higher damage mitigation through this magic aura. And that's how you get the shield. Alright, now let's go over traits and enchants and the armor types. So starting with the helm, we are wearing a heavy helm, reinforced, so we can maximize its resistance value. This is to allow us to build to higher resistances, so we have greater capabilities of being a tank or a damage dealer. Now, with this, we have a tri-set, so we can hybridize our character into all 3 roles, tank, healer, and damage dealer. And then moving on to the shoulder, we are using a Divine Shoulder max stamina enchant. The Divine Shoulder increases the effectiveness of Mundus Stones we use. So if we're using the Lord Mundus Stone or the Lady Mundus Stone, we get higher resistances. If we're using the Thief Mundus Stone, we get higher crit chance. If we use any of the other Mundus Stones, we can take advantage of them. Now onto the gloves, or the chest, I mean. We are using an Invigorating medium chest. And this is a 5-1-1 setup. We wear 1 heavy, 1 light, all the rest medium. So our head and shoulders are medium and light, or heavy and light, and the rest of our body is all medium. Now this, we got Invigorating to maximize our resource management with Magicka and Stamina recovery. Now, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. It just helps with maintaining your resources. And we do use a tri-set here, again, to maximize our ability to play all 3 roles. Moving on to the gloves, we are using medium gloves with a max stamina enchant and divines again to maximize our Mundus Stone use. Moving on to the belt, we are using a medium belt, max stamina, divines with a Mundus Stone for the Mundus Stone benefit, and then the higher max stamina. With having all these enchants for stamina, we can build our stamina pools to a higher value regardless of the race we are. Now, the next like I said, piece is going to be our leggings. These are invigorating as well to give us that higher recovery rate, plus the tri-stat benefit from being all 3 roles. Then, we are using another max stamina with divines to take advantage of that Mundus Stone increase. So we have 4 small pieces, divines, the bigger pieces, reinforced, invigorating, and invigorating. Now, if you wanted to, these two invigorating, you could go divines as well if you wanted to, but you'd be sacrificing roughly about anywhere between 35, 40, maybe even 50 recovery. Excuse me. Moving on to the jewelry. We are running 2 trirone pieces. This is to maximize our ability to be all 3 roles: damage, tank, and healer. And then we have 2 weapon damage enchants upon both the rings. This is to maximize our weapon damage capabilities. Now, moving on to the necklace. We have a Bloodthirsty with a stamina recovery enchant. This Bloodthirsty is going to increase our damage against enemies under 25% health by 10%. And then on top of that, we get 169 stamina recovery. Moving on to the weapons. Starting with the main weapon on the front bar, we are using a sharpened main hand weapon. This is going to increase our physical and spell penetration by 1376, and it's also going to increase our poison, or give us extra poison damage on the enchant. So we're going to take advantage of that stuff. Now, the offhand is more physical damage with stamina restore. This helps us maintain our stamina resources a little bit better, but we're using Nirnhone to increase the weapon damage by 15%. So it increases the damage of this weapon by 15%. So it's not just the weapon damage, it also affects our spell damage as well. Back bar. Infused two-handed axe with a weapon damage enchant. This is going to maximize our weapon damage capabilities and our spell damage, so we can take advantage of both of those things. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, let's go ahead and take a look at our skills and the class skills first. So I take all the class skills that I think best reflect this character's ability to play this way. So I use a lot of stamina based stuff. So I use the Standard of Might sometimes, I use a lot of this other stuff. In the Draconic powers, I do the same thing. I take it to reflect my ability to play this character more effectively in different roles. Earth and Heart, the same thing. Now, I also take all the class passives. This allows me to take advantage of all my skills and abilities and passives. Now, weapon skills, because we primarily use a two-handed and dual wield, we will start with the dual wield skills. We take the dual wield skills that are going to best reflect our ability to play this character, so we use the ones that best do that. The same thing with two-handed. We take the skills and passives that best reflect our ability to play this character, depending on our own preference of choice. Now, that you guys have seen the weapon skills and passives that we use, we're going to move on to armor. Now, because of the 5-1-1 setup, we do use the top 3 of the light armor to take advantage of those in times of when we play different roles. Like for healer, we're going to take advantage of these. When we're playing damage dealer, we're going to use all the medium armor passives to take greater advantage of that. And then on the heavy armor, we're going to take the top 3 to take advantage of those, so we can get the greater capabilities in our character. Moving on to world skills, soul magic. Ultimate ability and active ability, we do take these and the passives to best have the best ability to play our character even more. Fighters Guild, we take all the Fighters Guild abilities and passives. The reason why is to take advantage of those tools in different situations. Like when I'm playing a tank with this, I'll use Silver Leash. I might even use the Evil Hunter sometimes when I'm playing a tank, so I can get that higher weapon damage or higher weapon crit. And then I can also use, the tripods with this and Inner Light, so I can actually take advantage of magic and melee in a tank form, or even as a damage dealer. Solo play. Moving on to Mage's Guild. I do unlock all the Mage Guild's abilities that best reflect my ability to play. I don't worry about turning this to Structured Entropy, because when I play this thing as a tank, I'm not worried about my health. I've got survivability. This thing's a beast, so. Alright, moving on to the Psijic Order. Same thing here. I take the skills and abilities that best reflect my ability to play this character in different roles, like a healer, and so on and so forth. And I do the same thing with Undaunted. I take the abilities that best reflect my ability to play this character in different roles. But all the Undaunted abilities are synergies, so I take advantage of that in different situations, along with the passives. Assault skills, I take the ones that best reflect me in PvE instead of PvP, because I don't play a lot of PvP. If you do, you can unlock the skills and passives. All the skills and passives. Same thing goes with the support. I take the ones that best reflect my ability to play PvE, not PvP. Then racial skills, we are an Argonian with this, and this is the surprising thing. Argonian plays this really well. See, we have Life Mender. This increases our healing done by 6%, so when we use one of our abilities called Bloodthirsty, we actually boost our healing that we get from the final hit. Because the final hit deals 300% more damage and heals you for 69% of that damage done. So, I take advantage of that. And then we also have the Argonian Resistance, which increases our max health and makes us immune to disease status effects, and also gives us disease resistance. And then we have Resourceful, which increases our max magicka by 1,000, and then whenever we drink a potion, we restore we restore 4,000 extra health, magic, and stamina. This applies to every resource from one potion. So if we're using magicka power pots, we're getting health, stamina, and magicka back, more magicka than anything. And then if we're using stamina power pots, we're getting more stamina, health, and magicka back, but we get all the resources back. And then if we're using Tri-Stat, we get a ton back. Alchemy, medicinal use, you want to get this. It's really good to have, and it's not too hard to level the skill line to get it. So when using potions, resulting effects last 30% longer, and then with Provisioning, Gourmet, and Connoisseur, both of these will make your food and drinks last 20 minutes longer. So like your Dubious Cameron Throne, your Witchmother's Potent Brew, 20 minutes longer. Your Tri-Stat food, 20 minutes longer. Alright, now let's go over the skills on our bar. Starting with the first skill, we have Rending Slashes. This does a decent amount of damage up front and a large amount of damage over time. It also reduces the movement speed of the enemy by 40% for 4 seconds. Next, we have Venomous Claw. This does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over time. And then Poisoning seeps into the target and deals increased damage the longer it lasts, dealing 12% more damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Next, we have Bloodthirst. This does damage all over time in rapid strikes, 5 consecutive attacks, doing X amount of damage, and then it heals you, or does the final damage, does 300% more damage, and then it heals you for 69% of the damage caused. Next ability, we have Noxious Breath. This does poison damage up front and X amount of poison damage over 10 seconds. It also applies Major Fracture, reducing the physical resistance of the enemy by 5,280. This is going to maximize your ability to do damage with this build. Next ability we have Deadly Cloak. Now we use this to basically give us Major Evasion, which reduces damage from area of attacks by 25%, but also every 3 seconds we send up Shrapnel Pulse, dealing X amount of physical damage to all enemies within 5 meters. Really good for trash packs. Next, we use Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is our primary spammable. We use this all the time. This does X amount of damage up front, X amount of damage over 6 seconds, and while slotted, it increases your weapon damage by 5%. Moving on to the back bar, we have Rearming Trap. Now we have this because we need something to help us do damage. So this also grants us minor force, but we use it to place a trap on the ground. And it takes 1.5 seconds to arm. Once it's armed, it triggers, doing X amount of damage and X amount of damage over 6 seconds of mobilizing that enemy for 6 seconds if they can be immobilized. It also grants you major or minor force, increasing your critical damage by 10%. After being triggered, the trap resets and can be triggered again one more time. The next ability we have is called Eruption. Now this does a certain amount of damage in the location for 18 seconds. It does X amount of flame damage every second, but it also reduces movement speed of enemies by 70%. It also does flame damage immediately on cast, so it actually does like 4k damage with the way this is set up. Next ability we have is Brawler or Carve. This does X amount of damage up front and X amount of damage over 10 seconds. Next ability we have is called Razor Caltrops. Now we throw these out, they explode doing X amount of damage on the initial exploding part. Then they throw caltrops all over the place that deal X amount of damage every second for 12 seconds and reduce movement speed of enemies by 30%. This in combination with this, you can practically bring enemies to a standstill. Now, the next thing we have is Igneous Weapons. This boosts both weapon and spell damage by 20% for 42 seconds. It also grants us Minor Brutality for 20 seconds, increasing our weapon damage again by another 10%. So we get 20% spell and weapon damage with another 10% weapon damage on top of it. Our last ability we have is our last ultimate, Corrosive Armor. When we use this, we imbue ourselves basically with oxidized dragon's blood in our veins, limiting incoming damage by 3% of our max health and dealing X amount of poison damage to enemies around each enemy around us for 12 seconds. Now, while active, your attacks ignore all physical resistance. So this is another one you can use to just go into a berserking Dragon's Rage. Alright, now that you guys have seen that, let's talk about CP. Starting with the red tree. We have 56 in Ironclad. This reduces your damage taken from direct damage attacks by 20%. We have 38 in the medium armor focus. This gives us 3,250 physical resist for wearing 5 pieces of medium armor. Because we are a Dragon Knight, we also get increased physical or spell resist from the Draconic passive Scaled Armor, which is 3,300. Because we're wearing 1 piece of light, 1 piece of medium, or 1 piece of heavy, we get resistances from both those armor types. This is how we can get that more balanced armor or physical and spell resist. Moving on to the middle red tree, we have 31 into Thick Skin, reducing your damage taken from damage over time effects by 13%. We have 43 into Hardy, reducing your damage taken from physical, poison, disease damage by 10%. And then 43 into Elemental Defender, reducing Flame, Frost, Shock, and magic damage by 10%. Moving on over here, we have 40 into Bastion, increasing the effectiveness of your damage shields by 16%. 19 into Quick Recovery, increasing your healing received by 5%. In the green tree, we have 40 into Warlord, reducing your break free cost by 16%. 16 into Sprinter, reducing your sprint cost by 10%. 16 into Bashing Focus, reducing your bash cost by 10%. And then moving on over here, we have 75 into Mooncalf, increasing stam recovery by 14%. 43 into Tenacity, increasing stam recovery for fully charged heavy attacks by 10%. And then over here, we have 40 into Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll cost by 16%. And then 40 into Shadow Ward, reducing your block cost by 16%. This thing is not hybridized, so we put 43 into Blessed, increasing your healing done by 10%. If you're going to play a healer, I would hybridize this. Moving on, we have 35 in a Physical Weapon Expert. This increases our light and heavy attack damage done with two-handed, one-handed sword and shield, dual-wield bows, and werewolf form by 20%. 40 in Mastered Arms, increasing your damage done with direct damage attacks by 16%. This does unlock Retaliation, Reposit, and Butcher, which increases your light and heavy attacks by 5% when enemies are below 25% health. Moving on. 56 in the Mighty, increasing physical, poison, and disease damage done by 12%. 56 in the Precise Strikes, increasing critical damage and critical healing of stamina abilities by 20%. And then 40 in the Thaumaturge, increasing your damage done with damage over time effects by 16%. Now the thing I'm going to do with this is I'm going to show you guys a quick parse on this little skeleton here, a target dummy, and then on the big target dummy over there. Each of these represent different playthings. So this is like if you're doing soloing a world boss, or you're playing through a dungeon on solo, or you're playing in a group in a dungeon, this is going to represent that kind of damage capability, okay, if you're doing this kind of stuff. So, first thing, Potion. That's what we want to do first. Our buff next, Trap Beast. Oh, really? There we go, 22,679 damage. I have gotten up to 30k with this on that target skeleton. It's really hard for me to do that because of getting the rotation right. But if you can get about 30k DPS on that little one. Now, the results of that look like this. You have 3,823 weapon damage, and then with Magicka, you have 2,470 with 28% critical, and then over here you have a 53% critical, 80% critical damage, and 6,656 penetration with 1,376 spell penetration. Our eruption ability that we were using was doing roughly 1,149 damage per second. And that's about what the tooltip reads. Alright, again, we're going to do this with the big guy here. And this time we're going to throw an ultimate in with it. Now this I can usually get up to about 40k DPS normally. But I'm just having a really bad day with my rotations. I apologize for that. But there you go, roughly about 30k DPS with that. We're going to wait until we come out of combat, and I will show you guys the rest of that. The thing is immune to the Silitrix stun, but it still can be affected by Silitrix. Because Silitrix will attack whatever enemy you hit. Alright. So this is what this thing looks like when it's fully buffed out and everything. 3,012 spell damage, 34% spell critical, 60% critical damage, 100% spell pen. They don't show that here. And then the same thing over here. We have 4,218 weapon damage, 59% weapon critical, 80% critical damage. And look at this penetration. It's through the roof because the thing doesn't read the right penetration values. But if you look at the different abilities here, our eruption was doing 1530 per tick. And then our Bloodthirsty was hitting for a max of 10k. Our Noxious Breath was hitting for about 16. 16 on Carve, 15 on Razor Caltrops, 10 on Poison or on Eruption's initial hit. So this thing actually does do quite a bit of damage. Now I'm going to make some minor adjustments so I can play this thing more solo friendly. And all we're going to do is make some tiny adjustments here so we can do that. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and jump over to the Depths of Malatar, and I'm going to show you how effective this thing could be in a group dynamic setting, but also how well it can solo play. And yes, we do use 2 damage shields here, because we want that greater survivability. If you guys don't know anything about Depths of Malatar, it's one of the latest dungeons added with the Wrathstone DLC, and it's considered some of the most challenging and difficult dungeons added to the game right now.
As in, no one left inside.
Take it to the Imperial.
And when you're playing this thing in tank, you have about a 15k, or not a 15, a 12k shield all the time. But as I said, this thing's pretty beast. Right out the door. It can take a beating, it can dish out a beating, and it's really hard to be killed. He killed me. I could have soloed it, but that, my friends, is the Dragons Rage Barbarian, a beast of a damage dealer and a insane thing to kill because they've got so much resilience in them. So, but that's pretty much it for this video, guys, and I hope the person who requested this build likes it a lot. I'm sure they do. But that's pretty much it, and that leads me to the next thing. If you guys like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. If you guys want to see more videos by me, you can subscribe. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.